Alright, so this will be the second half of the 17th of September casting workshop recording. Invective and Rain will be taking this one. So for Invective, it believes his strongest parts are simplifying concepts, complex concepts, and using his debate experience. For the growth opportunities are trying to end sentences strongly and try not to get fixated on certain ideas. Is trying generally to try and bring out the details of the game that will elevate the experience for a viewer. For Rain, they're looking to try. Their strengths are in the entertainment, keeping things moving forward and finding the most relevant things to focus on. They are looking to grow by trying to support their partner better and playing to their strengths, with the overall goal of hyping a game for players, trying to bring out what makes it exciting, getting the viewer to buy into it. But okay, so as before. Invective and Rain will give you the free reign to just run an intro as long as you want to, and then whenever you indicate, if Maisie, if you could start up the game, and then we'll just go for a stage and see where we stand, or up to the end of stage 2. Cool.
Yeah, sounds good. Rain, you want to kick it off?
Yeah.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
And we are back for the penultimate game of the day, Game 5. Here are the grand finals of the Samsung Galaxy Ultraliga TFT tournament. It's been an exciting day of games. I'm joined as well by the man, the myth, the legend, Invective. And Invective, Game 5, a lot on the line. How do you see playstyles changing moving into this second to last game?
Yeah, this is the part of the set where we can really see all the things that the players have worked on for basically 90 days. What I think we might see is people bringing out their pocket legend picks. What do we need to do to go first, second, or third when we're playing a little bit from behind? Well, maybe the legend choice is what's going to take us over the edge.
Yeah, those legends can change your entire play style up. Some of them seem kind of geared towards that first or eighth style of gameplay. Some of them, are more meta and a little safer in the pit, sort of like what position you're playing for. So it'll be very, very interesting what portals we wind up with and what legends all of our players are picking as we are coming in now to the game with the portals loading up. And we've got some really interesting choices here between the three. What would you most like to see out of this, Invective? Which portal tickles your fancy?
So I think that these guys are all very competitive players. I think Thresh's Sanctum and Ecliptic Vaults are both excellent choices to make the game more stable, whereas last game we got a ton of volatility. Even with Argon Prime offering a stimmy, you never know what you're going to get out of that. And the other two choices in our previous game were even crazier. This game, it looks like none of the players wanted to opt for Shifting Sands. No one was willing to flip the coin in that way, and they wanted something like this. Ecliptic Vaults, let's just get a little bit of gold every time we take an augment.
Yeah, I think that early on in these tournaments, right, you might play a little bit loosey-goosey. You're playing kind of what the game gives you. Now we've really settled in, and we're now looking at you're talking about these legend picks, Ornn, Ezreal, Poro, Earth. Like, we've got this pretty diverse sort of mix of things. When you're looking at these legend picks, what jumps out to you? What screams at you about how people are playing?
Well, I think one thing that's really interesting is it seems like Stinky got a little bit burned by Master Yi in Game 4. Didn't opt to go for it again in Game 5, looking instead for Poro to offer a little bit more diversity in the early and mid-game picks that could define how the game is played for Stinky.
Yeah, and we've seen so often, like, there are a lot of very powerful augments that are not tied into the legend that you've picked, right? Some of the strongest augments in the game, I'd say, are not tied into that legend. They are sort of more generic. And so playing that Poro, I think, opens up opportunities for you to see something like Ravenous Hunter or Riftwalker or even like Glacial Breeze, some of these more generic augments that give you a bit of direction but also are extremely strong.
Yeah, and this is such a powerful opener we're getting out of Spotty here. With the Viego 2 and Callista already, this is exactly what you want to see out of your early game. You're even holding Piltover on the bench just in case. That could offer an entirely different avenue for how to play out the game, but one that's just as powerful.
Yeah, and we've got this first augment coming in, the silver augment, which is not going to be the hugest impact, branching out and immediately reforging, I believe it was the Rogue Spat into Invoker. I think a pretty daring choice to not just take this augment, but also immediately re-roll it and just roll the dice.
Oh, it's very brave. I think Simply is in this situation saying, I know exactly what to do with every single emblem in the game, and I'm willing to put it all on the line in this situation. Unfortunately, I don't think either of the choices that Simply was offered really lined up with the items that they were given. And I think it'll be interesting to see just how they are able to make that work.
Yeah, it's so frustrating when you do make this decision, and it's really a gamble, right? It's a risk, and you think like, okay, it's going to have to pay off, right? My whole set is on the line, and not necessarily a gamble that hasn't paid off yet, but it is looking pretty dire for them just from that initial situation that they're in.
Yeah, speaking of gambling, we're sitting across from Stinky, who just last game went down to something like 20 HP before Wolves, and this game is opting yet again to roll the dice with that Pandora's Bench augment.
Yeah, roll the units at the very least. And I think, there's a lot of different sort of avenues that get opened up when you take it early, right? You can play for these lower cost rerolls, right? You can play something like Samira and Cass or whatever, or you can be looking at like Noxus, Katarina, Darius. You could be looking at Karma reroll. Or going for that 4 cost, sort of like game winner sort of situation. What motivates somebody to take that augment so early here at 2-1?
To be honest, I think Stinky may not have seen options that were as amenable to him. I think that taking Pandora's Bench early with not a lot of item direction or a lot of unit direction is something that's really challenging, because you never know what you're going to get, and you may not be offered any other direction in that line. So here I think it's really interesting that Stinky is opting to hold the Invokers. One other option that they may have been able to take this turn would just be to play the Bastion units, make 30 gold, and then lean more into the Trist and the Kale. But this is actually going to be interesting because Stinky looks to have lost the loss streak.
Yeah.
And, what are we going to do from there?
Yeah, I was going to note that, they had 22 gold. They clearly had this 2-item gold opener. And from that spot, usually you're looking to loss streak, right? You don't have an item that you can slam. You've taken a non-combat augment and you're like, okay, I'm just going to lose 5 and see what the game gives me later. So taking that loss there is going to be a pretty big hit to their econ. And now we see a full open fort, to make that 30 gold. Again, a lot of these players seem really invested in this full open, like, I'm not going to make a decision until like stage 3 sort of play style that, I don't see that very often in NA. Maybe it is a European thing, a Polish thing. But I do think it is an interesting play style.
Yeah, you even saw Simply take the hands off of the keyboard, put them behind the head, and just say, hey, this silver augment might as well be AFK. And I think that is an interesting position to be in. You're in the grand finals, game 5, 2 games left. What do? You decide, I'm making 40.
Yeah, and it's so it's such a pleasure watching these players at this sort of land situation, having those cameras. We could see the sort of like clap of, like, yes, a good win. I got my Noxus stack. Like, everything's moving along pretty swimmingly. I just always enjoy those little peeks into the personality of our players. And I think these augments also give us a peek. Worth noting, we have a challenger heart that's been picked up. A lot of interesting augments that have been picked up around the lobby.
Yeah, I think contrary to how some of the other players are playing this early game, Challenger Heart, really indicates I want to go for this one line. It's a lot less flexible, and it's a lot less open. We also see Shredden here having the Rage Blade slammed and an open Shiv on the bench. I think whether they have been traumatized or not by someone holding 5 Azirs in the last game, they said, I'm going to go for it again. I think that is what they're going to be looking to set up here.
Yeah, and they will, they do have the option, obviously, of playing into an Aphelios line or even a Zeri line. We can see that they've got these Warwick pairs, they've got Jinx pair. That Rageblade has been so versatile this entire set because it does fit into so many different compositions, right? And so we're seeing here Shredden saying like, I'm going to play my strongest board. I'm going to slam this item that can go on anyone, right? It can go on a Azir, it can go on Zeri, it can go on Aphelios, it can go wherever I want and just let the game tell me what I'm going to play.
For sure, and I hope for them that the game really offers one of those options. We saw simply the last game go for something like the Aphelios or the Zeri, had the Bastions upgraded in the front line, but wasn't able to find either the Gwen or the Aphelios or the Zeri, and ended up playing around a Lux too. I think that was a really tough position to navigate, and they didn't get exactly what they wanted out of the stimulus, so that's a real challenge. Here we see Fifek opening the board on to 6, really looking to maximize that last turn of blood money, and going up against an inconsistency player, I think they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, this should be a pretty handy loss here for Fifek, who is playing one of my personal favorites this set, that Trist reroll that looks like they've leaned pretty hard into it. And that is, in my experience, when it hits, you're playing for a top one, but boy, this roll down here coming up probably at, right after Krugs is going to be so crucial for them to be able to hit some of these key upgrades they need to stabilize.
Yeah, I think it'll be really impactful. And now we see simply working on this mid-game board, right? With the invokers, the karma, you've got your items lined up, you've managed to find a rod, and I think you're finally getting to see what you can play around with this invoker spat.
Right. And, we've got the karma. And I think having that early karma is such a relief if you've ever played this comp. It sometimes seems like she just gets deleted from the game. So knowing you at least have one karma, you've got the invoker spat, you've got Jewel Gauntlet, you've got the option to make a shiv, you've got the option to make Hex Tech later or some other sort of item for her. Yeah, you're low on HP. You've been open for it this whole time, but I think they can breathe a little sigh of relief and say, okay, I know where I'm going. The game gave me my direction, and huge hit here. I was talking about they were really going to need to hit, and that's probably the biggest hit that you could possibly get here on 3-1.
Yeah, I think this is already looking like a really successful roll down for Fifek, seeing a ton of the one costs that you want. Now at this point, the only question is how deep are you willing to dig? Is there another 3 cost that you're liable to hit? And it looks like we're really close to Maokai, we're really close to Poppy, and we want to push the limits of that, going all the way down to 10 gold.
Yeah, and I think that's a great choice here. You're one off Maokai, you're one off Poppy, you're one off Viego. It is worth its weight in gold to spend that gold and hit those upgrades. Trist 3, really, really big, very stable board as things go. But if you really want to succeed with this board, you've got to be able to push levels. You got to hit these early and be able to econ back up to push levels and get that 4 gunner online, and get that Zeri in, get that Jinx in, get that Teemo in for the Yordle spike. So a really good spot for them to spend that gold.
Okay, let's
and look at that.
All right. So from Vector and Rain, what were your thoughts on the first part?
Oh, man, I miss casting. I love casting.
I had a lot of fun with Rain. I feel like we don't always get to cast together just because it's set up by Aegis and whatever happens with the pairings. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. Always happy to do it again.
Yeah, I feel like one of my sort of previous I think weaknesses was being overlong, being too wordy. And I personally, just to pat myself on the back, I think I've done a pretty good job of kind of tightening things up a little bit and being more conversational.
All right, can we get some dots for folks who've got some thoughts in the general chat? Okay, cool. Let's start with you, Maisie.
Hello again. No, my first question was going to be, have you two casted together before? But that's obviously been answered now. I feel like between the both of you, there was a really great cohesion. There was a good chemistry. Like you gave each other room to talk, and whenever there was a beat to hit, like you both had each other's back on it. So it did feel like you had casted before. So that would have been my first question. If you hadn't casted before and you pulled out that chemistry, I'd be like, "Can you bottle some of that and send it to me,
Right.
please?" Because it was awesome. I really liked your control at the start there, Rain. So it was almost as if you were just sort of finding the baseline of the caster you were with. You were sort of asking a couple of leading questions at the start just to sort of establish that baseline. It felt very in control and comfortable. And the questions that you were asking were really good because not only were you getting information out to the audience in sort of a non-patronizing way, but you were establishing a good storyline for the late game. So this is something you can call back to later in the broadcast to be like, "Hey, remember in stage 2 when we talked about X? Well, Y has happened," and I really enjoyed that. And I felt like I was a part of you and Invective's conversation, so it felt very flowy between the two of you. But I felt like I was included there as well. I didn't feel like you were speaking like at me. I felt like you were speaking to me, and that's something that only comes with a lot of practice, I think. So I felt very comfortable as an audience member under your control there. Um, Invective, your knowledge and personality. Now, yeah, your personality was incredible. There was something really. I wrote the word zesty. There's something really zesty here about you, and you actually remind me of the way that
I gotta
I
use
like to
that word
cast.
more often.
That's
Yeah,
great.
sorry, I'm Scottish, so my vocabulary is a bit
Yeah,
weird.
no, zesty's a great word.
No,
It's
yeah,
got a
we
lot.
take
It's like a
those.
very impactful word. Just like it says a lot. Anyway, go for it.
But you remind me of the way that I like to cast because I do have a more sort of analytical mind for things, but at the same time, I feel like analysts can sometimes maybe just recite facts and it doesn't engage me personally, so I feel like I like to bring a lot of my personality in, and I felt that with you. This was again, I felt very safe, I felt very comfortable. I loved when you made the play to look at the player cams because for me, I love hearing the story of the players, and even if I don't know the players, I want to know that I can root for one of them, and I felt like under your control there, that I could have easily been like, "Wow, Simply Wojtek, look at the way he's just chilling with a Piltover. My God, yes, I'm rooting for him." And that was all through the way that you built that up with your narrative and your storytelling. Let's see. Yeah, there was a lot of trust and flow between the two of you, and you gave each other the space, and you worked really well together. And I'm really bad at giving any sort of negative criticism, so well done.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Does anyone else want to put in anything? Okay. Well, I'll go next, and then I guess we'll leave off with Boop. Boop, did you have anything that you want to put in for this one, actually?
I do. I have a good amount. So
Okay.
I don't.
All right.
Yeah, you do you.
Okay. So I think Ray, my biggest concern coming into it from what you were saying was that you were going to be too self-sacrificial in the cast, and that you would be kind of like, basically sort of ceding ground on everything to Invective. And I think that did somewhat come to fruition. That I think it felt like you were sitting back a bit too much in the cast.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of opportunities, I think, for you to drive this narrative of the game forward. But you didn't, because you were kind of like, you would sort of defer, I think, maybe a little bit too much to into what Invective wanted to talk about.
Okay.
I think particularly towards the end of that one, I know this is just my sort of preference in terms of its setup. I think it started to get into the area where you would start color casting a lot particularly towards the end of the stage. And I was like, I really wish you'd be keeping at least one eye on like the overall game more, and less on like getting into the weeds of how a particular composition or a particular setup works. Just because I feel like I'm sort of losing what's going on in the game quite a lot if nobody is talking about it and everybody is talking about the details.
Okay.
From Invective side of things, yeah, very concise and confident. I think you broke down the concepts very clearly. I think there was a few times where I thought you maybe brought in a little, because I think you had a really good idea of all the information you wanted to bring in, and it was all really good information. I think it could maybe be a slightly less information, because it started to tip over the line of being bits too much for me to take on at once at certain points, where I was like, okay, this is all good information, but I think it could have maybe been slightly more selective how it came in. Because you had the cross-game information, you had good forward-looking stuff, and picking up on streaks and the players' behaviors and stuff. Like, And there's loads and loads of good stuff there. I think I would like you to see pull the reins back very slightly in terms of the amount you're putting out, just to make sure that it's all understandable.
Yep, that makes sense. I definitely need a filter sometimes.
Okay, Boop, what do you think?
I'm gonna cause a little controversy here, Counter. I disagree with your first point about Rain, to be honest
Yeah?
with you.
Please do.
Maybe it's maybe you have a little bit more experience listening to Rain and like have a little bit more of that dichotomy to use. But I actually was gonna compliment Rain on how natural he sounded in terms of using the voice, because I think what Rain was attempting to do was make sure that his partner. Rain was very successful at what he set out to do in terms of his goals for what this particular exercise was for, in my opinion. So, like, setting up Invective really, really well. I think maybe it was a little bit too much of a general personality shift. I don't think you need to like be like more hype or anything like that. I think what just needed to happen was just maybe sometimes when Invective stopped talking was for you to match energy. And this is where most of my feedback is going to be when it comes to matching energy. So it definitely felt like that y'all were kind of in a different level when it came to how you were casting, if that makes sense. So Invective came in super hot, like super excited, right? And then when it came back to Rain, it was back to your natural voice, and you know it was good because the feedback I would give Invective was to take more of that natural voice, but that wasn't happening in that particular exercise. So you, as the play-by-play, can kind of take a clue on that and try to match, because it was just so much of a dichotomy, like that I noticed. If that makes sense, right?
It does. Yeah.
And so, but I also want to really, really reiterate that you did a really good job asking questions. The questions that you asked were really, really good. And I think that, like, in terms of the focus here, it was exactly what you wanted to get out of it personally. I would agree that you did also get a little bit into the weeds, and I think that was a little bit of an accommodation for Invective, which is going to bring me to my next point, and it was kind of broached upon with Counterfeit. But have you ever heard the term teaching to the top of the class?
Yes.
That is what Invective was doing. So Invective, like, when that's kind of like another like mantra we use for like getting too much into the weeds. A lot of TFT casters, and you can actually catch this with a lot of us, is the people that are most responsive to our casting are going to be like the smart people and like the players, and for some reason we really want to impress them with our knowledge, but we also forget that there's a totally separate side of that player base that has no idea what you're talking about. You know what I mean? So when you focus on just teaching the highest level concepts, you're automatically eliminating part of your audience, right? So what compensates for that is your excitement. But when you get into the details, you just have to make sure that the words that you're using are important. And that's kind of like what we were talking about intention before. Remember, as a color caster, you have a limited amount of time, right? Say you only get to use 1,000 words. You don't want to waste a lot of those words on things that aren't necessary. You know what I mean? And so I would kind of just say try to expand your view on what these concepts mean and kind of start on a little bit more of that foundation. I talked about that pyramid of information, and I think you're kind of starting like mid to the top side with kind of missing the foundation, because I think you're using Rain's question as the foundational concept. Is my theory there. Does that all make sense? Any questions on any of that before I move on to my last thing?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense for me. And I think that you're completely right. I do have a tendency to do that, and it's something I should work on. One question that I do have is that, like, how much do you think that should vary based on your expectation of how long people have been watching? So, for example, like, if this was the first game of broadcast, how different do you think that should be to the last game of broadcast?
Really, really good question. I think that's up to you and your narrative building, right? Because you're going to be planting seeds like early on to where you can come back at this moment in time, be like, they keep making this wrong decision. In game 2, they did this, and it's game 5 now, and they're still doing the same thing, and this is why. Is kind of like how I would approach that. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because it's like, if I change my language a little bit and change my focus a little bit to focus on basic concepts, I personally don't want to still be talking about those basic concepts like 2 games later, because I don't know, or I don't know what you think, but feel like I want there to be a little bit of follow through from
I
the
agree.
audience, and maybe that's not realistic.
No, I agree, because I think part of the watching experience is the education of the audience, right? However, I would probably just throw a quick throwback, right? Oh, remember in game one when it did that? Because honestly, that's always good. To be honest with you, when you can because when we talk about narrative, and this was kind of like one of my last things, and this should help you a lot. When we talk about narrative, we tend to think about it in the games and the lobbies that we're currently in. It's a little bit harder for us to expand that out into, hey, the beginning of the day, like during the host when they said this about the points. That's about, that's part of the narrative that we're talking about now. But you should 100% grow your expectations of the audience as time goes on, but definitely call back to these moments where you did do that teaching. So say they're like tuning in for the first time, because that's something that you have to kind of like keep in to consideration, is that in esports, no one watches the whole thing. Right, so I'm probably going to pop in at lobby 1, and I'll check back at lobby 5, right? So you also have to keep those people in mind, but the meat of your color and the meat of your detail should get a little bit more detailed as the day goes on, as you see things happening more often that you can then expound upon. So yes, you're totally right, but it's going to take a little bit of your like casting skill to make that work for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just wanted a little bit of clarification, and you definitely gave it, because like I was definitely thinking about when you mentioned that nobody watches the whole thing, right? Like, I don't know. I also pop like in other times between like mainstream and co-stream, and I feel like you're not gonna get all mainstream all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, and then last thing for both of y'all, and this is going to be a really good concept, I think, for everyone. It's something that I'm still working on. It's kind of the concept of filler. So filler is not usually very good. You want to be intentional about it, but I'm specifically talking about the filler words, things like and and yeah. And so, Rain, you actually have a lot of. You were talking about polish, and you have a lot of those filler words in your vocabulary as you're casting, particularly the which yeah, exactly, so so just be conscious about it, because the way that filler words work is that once you replace it with one, that is now your filler word. So you gotta like be pretty rotational about it, but be really, really aware that you're expanding the time of your points by use of those fillers. Right, so every time you say and it's almost, for me, I'd rather you just pause.
Sure.
And like
That's not one
it.
I interestingly enough, like I try to be intentional about ums and ahs, just because I also have like a background in performance and all these sorts of things. And I think is not one that I've thought of or heard before. And so I think it's my new filler that I didn't realize I was doing. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, the other hidden filler word that everyone uses and they don't know is filler is as well.
I was going to say absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely is really good. So, the last thing that I would say for everyone here, when
we've already had a last thing. We need to be
oh
careful.
yeah, sorry. But it goes along with the filler, right? Is just to say. It's just to say, you know what? Like we said it before, silence is golden. It's totally okay to take that breath. Your partnership is really, really great. I would really like for you to focus on this next one, on making every word that you say intentional and worthwhile.
Yeah, no, I think that's a general thing of like, that's how you remove the filler words rather than just replace them, is by having that intention there. But so for Invective and Rain, could you each give, for the benefit of the audience here, what your particular focus is going to be for the second half, what you're trying to improve on and take on board from what's just been said?
Yeah, I'm going to lean into what you and Boop have provided as feedback, and I think I'm going to try once or twice to make a slow point where I am very intentional about filtering my information and giving like an easy point, and then I can speed up a little bit and get back into a more complicated point.
Okay. And Rain?
Yeah. To take a little bit from both of you guys, being intentional about the words that I use, but also leaning in. I think the matching energy and also taking up more space and not being deferential go kind of hand in hand to step in to step into my role and match that energy and keep that momentum going in a intentional way.
Okay, no, that sounds good. I always try and like see it as, I think a lot of people, particularly people who are kind of like trying to be more polite, can sort of see it as a negative thing taking up space. But ideally, the cast is the combination of the two of you. So by taking up more space, you're actually giving more to the cast as well. But anyway, so Maisie, if you're ready, we can start up again with our second half.
Yeah, all good.
All right, 3, 2, 1, let's go.
So we've got this 3/2 augment choice coming up. They've re-rolled into Portable Forge, Cybernetic Bulk, and Big Grab Bag, and it looks like they're going to go with that Portable Forge. Safe bet here. What choices are going through their head looking at those 3 options there?
Well, I think in this position, you really want to start building up these, like this tank and this frontliner and this damage dealer that you have in the reroll composition. You've got the Maokai, you've got the Tristana, and I think taking the Trinity Force for the Tristana really makes a lot of sense when you think about exactly what she wants to do in the fight. She wants a little bit of durability, she wants that extra bit of attack speed and that extra AD. All of this is what you want out of maximizing the value of this unit.
It's going to give her tons of stats, which is honestly something that she lacks a lot of the time. I've played this comp a lot, and you just find yourself in a spot of like, man, if I could just done a little bit more damage, especially since we don't have that Teemo in to give that Trist 4 yet. We've got the Gunners, and that's pretty important, but getting that extra damage out, and we can see here it's already paying dividends with her being able to put out so much damage and win pretty convincingly here.
Yeah, and I love that we've just looked away for a second. When we come right back, the bench is clear. There are 4 3-star units on the board. Everything seems perfect for Fifek to dominate the mid game.
Yeah, they hit everything that they needed to at perfectly the right time. And now, as I was saying before, they're going to be able to build that econ back up and push levels. And, they're in a really healthy spot to be able to do that. They're not, sitting there at 37, 28 HP. They're in a really good position to be able to win fights, build that econ back up, and go to level 8 or even level 9, I'd say, from this spot.
For sure. When we come over and look at Spotty's spot, as it were, I think that this is sort of a difficult situation to be in. You're very committed to the Challenger's line, and you've got the +2, the Challenger Heart and the Challenger's Emblem that can be so impactful on level 7 if you are able to hit every single Challenger unit. That being said, the roll down that's going to happen next turn is going to be so determinative of Spotty's performance for the rest of the game.
Right. The big spikes come when you're able to get those later challengers online, particularly that Yasuo and that Kaisa. And we can see there is that Yasuo with half a BT on the carousel if they're able to pull it off. And we do see Spotty goes right for it and says, okay, Yasuo, that's mine. And that, if they're able to find a Kaisa, I don't know whether they're going to level here at 3-5 or try to save it to 4-1, but they are now in a much better position than they were even just a round ago to be able to kick that comp into high gear.
Yeah, and I think this roll down, they've actually got a lot of gold saved up. They're going to be a really challenging person to fight on this turn, and they're in Shredden's pool. So, Shredden with this Aphelios got him itemized with Azir items. I think this is going to be a challenging few turns as other people get online.
Challenging them with the challengers. I see what you're doing. I get it. I see you. Yeah, it's going to be a sort of a very difficult spot for people to play around, right? That's coming in your pool. And if you're playing from behind, which I think a lot of people are, we were talking at the very beginning of the broadcast about playing it safe, right? Taking something, Ecliptic Vaults to play it safe. And we have people who are not only playing these very first or eighth sort of comps, but they're hitting hard early.
Yeah, and if we hop back over to Spotty here, I don't think we've found everything that we want. there isn't necessarily a Kaisa on the board, as we see that Viego is still holding the items that we want to put on her. But we have found something even more interesting, which is the Heimerdinger. And I think this Heimerdinger can really take this composition over the edge because it can provide all the utility that you wouldn't otherwise get from itemizing these two carries in Kaisa and Yasuo.
Yeah, it opens up so many more opportunities for your units to deal the damage that they need to deal, because you're not worrying about doing stuff to shred MR. You're not doing stuff to sunder armor. You're getting that from the Heimer, having hit it so early, and high rolling, I would say, being able to hit those Heimer turret augment choices that are so important.
Yeah, and I think Spotty is just 1 or 2 steps away from really dominating the lobby. But look at Stinky Abuser. This Pandora's Bench augment it looks like it's been a challenge to play around, and we're leaning into the Lux Azir, but we haven't got all of the forecasts that we need just yet.
Yeah, and they're able to, we can see here they've got these 3 forecasts that they're rolling, and we asked earlier about, do you try to do a low cost reroll or go for that sort of like big forecast win out here? And seems like Stinky's kind of in between. Like, they're not hitting the forecasts that they need, and they've had this the entire time, and they've got 1 upgraded unit on their board.
Yeah, and the Aatrox is such an interesting hit here as well, because this unit really enables your frontliners to be that much stronger when the Darkened Blade passes from unit to unit. But it doesn't necessarily fit with all the synergies that Stinky wants to get here at level 7. This Nasus 2, though, is such a huge hit, and the Azir from the Pandora's Bench.
Yeah, being able to slot in finally here at 4-1, being able to slot that Azir in is going to be a huge spike to their board, adding so much more damage, and that Nasus bringing in so much more frontline that they desperately needed. And, isn't it always the way that you take Pandora's and you're looking for something in particular and you don't get it from Pandora's, but you get it natural from your shop, and you're like, why did I even pick this augment? What am I doing?
Yeah, that augment definitely has a reputation for trolling. On the other hand, though, it looks like Spotty is just missing the 1 unit that he needs in his natural shop, the Kaisa. And so he's got no unit that he's willing to put all of these items on, because he's hit all the other challenger units, and he's also rolled down to 0 gold. So now we're in desperation mode, because if we don't hit that Kaisa, we are going to lose so much HP every turn.
And it's interesting that we were so excited to see Pandora's throw that Azir out there, throw a bone, and here we are looking at Kubi, who has Azir 2 here at 4-2 as we're coming into this final augment selection that is going to be make or break, I think, for a lot of our players.
Are we stopping there, or are we going to keep going?
Yep, that's a good place to stop. Oh, amazing!
I just took return on investment.
All right, so how did you both feel about that one?
I think the energy might have cooled off a little bit with the feedback. I didn't mind it a ton, but I think that did make the dynamic a little bit different. I tried to go it slow, and I'm honestly not sure how it went.
Okay. How about you, Rain?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, anytime you stop in the middle and take a break, you have to ramp it back up again. But with the specific sort of matching energy, I feel like I did that better in terms of like catching that wave that he would throw. I think it's interesting that until it was brought to my attention, I guess I was feeling very short-sighted, like not seeing like, oh yeah, he is actually throwing me a lot of energy. And when I was more tuned to it, when I was paying closer attention to it, I felt like I hit it a lot better. And I think I probably didn't take up as much space as I probably could have. But I don't know, I kind of want to hear what Invective has to say. Like he's a better player than I am. Like, you can look at our LOL chess. I want to know what he's teaching me. Like, I'm here to enable him to teach you. But I feel like it was a bit better. But I agree, it was taking the break kind of throws it off just a tiny bit.
All right, can we get some dots in the chat from anyone who's got any input? I know. Maybe
Uh,
you guys did too good of a job.
Oh yeah, one big compliment I just want to throw out there is like I kind of want to go back and watch the rest of this game once this finishes because I think you guys did a really good job setting up like the potential consequences and like storyline payoffs that started in the very beginning, went through stage 3 and now 4. Like there's a lot of big decisions that are about to happen that I just want to see the rest. So really good job I think on that one, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I want to know I want to see the Trist reroller win because I always want to see the reroller win. Like,
Yeah, I think I'm about to watch the rest of this game, to be honest.
Yeah, no, you should. It was a good event.
The rest of the final section, the last game was very, very thrilling. Like you didn't really know who was going to win until the very end. So it's actually a very nice watch.
Okay.
Okay.
It was a fun event, a real fun event.
Does anyone else have any stuff you want to put input before me and Boop start laying in?
Maybe for the future we can have like the solid time. Sorry, the start time was solid, but just a general expectation of how long we have to be here, just because it's Sunday night for me and I got work tomorrow. So I'd like to know for the future when I make the commitment to come exactly sort of how long. But I know this is the first one, so it's hard to gauge. So I don't mind.
Yeah, and that's almost assuredly 100. It is not almost. It is assuredly my fault. So apologies.
It's maybe sort of no. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very fair, Maisie. I think for future ones, this is actually the second one. But yeah, just keeping it to a timeline. I think particularly as we've got a good amount of people here who've got different things they need to say, and that's definitely something to work on. I think ideally, I would like it to be like 2 hours, like maximum, really. But yes, that definitely didn't happen here.
Sorry.
No,
That's
it's
fine.
okay. It's just I can make the commitment if I know how long my commitment is, but yeah. Just for the future.
Okay. If no one else has anyone else got anything for Rainer or Invective? I will take that as a no. All right. So I really enjoyed both your casting. I think I think there was some really, really good setup there, Rain, you were putting out there. I love the little challenger joke. I think that was wonderful, and I think TFT casting definitely should be a 3-ring circus where there's some degree of like joking and humor, because if there isn't, it gets very one note very quickly. I will say, I think my biggest thing come out of that one is I don't know if like what you were kind of seeing your role in the broadcast as being, but I think the biggest thing I would have liked to have seen done differently is a lot of the time it felt like Invector was making a point and then you would basically just follow up by repeating that point, or like expanding on that point. What I would have preferred for you to have been advancing the lobby story or trying to bring in more information. Because I think that's what sort of kept you from having a big of a part of it, because you were sort of generating your own material, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So sort of missed opportunities with the like when the augment display came up and showed like the secondary augments for everyone. That's a great chance to sort of start building out more of a flavor of the lobby kind of thing, and talking about let's check back in on our overall stories that are going on and see, this player we thought knew this thing has found an augment that's appropriate and stuff. It's a good sort of breather time to make sure the plates are kept spinning.
I think in that particular instance, not to like in my defense, but in my defense, I'm not used to that. Like Aegis doesn't have that. That's primarily where I've cast. So and I it popped up and I was like, I'm already like 3/4 deep into the thing that I'm saying, and it's hard to just stop and pivot out of that. Even if I probably should. But yeah, I will say I was aware of that and was like, oh right. They have that in this production. I did not anticipate this.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you'll get lots of opportunities to get more used to it, because it's not always there. But yeah, I did like there was a little bit more emphasis on the overall lobby state, which definitely, I think, again, definitely helps. It's so noticeable when that's absent in the conversation. Invective, I have a lot less because I was probably going to leave it to Boop to kind of do more of the colory things. My game, which is still fairly bad. But I particularly from the start, I really liked the explanation of the Tristana spot from the very beginning. I think that you did really well with sort of seeding a bunch of ideas into the cast, which could then be brought up later on and kind of built on. And for Spotty and the challenges, again, like there's a lot of like really good information that you're providing there, which would make the rest of the cast richer. So I thought that was really great. Oh,
Yeah, I think.
Oh no, please.
I think there's this joke in the debate community about like making your like when you make an argument and you're like, oh, this would be bad if it happened. You have to do a good job explaining why a bad thing is bad, but at some level, like you have to strike a balance between explaining like, at a good degree of difficulty and like when it goes too simple, it's like when people die, they are dead.
Yes.
The first rule of Tautology Club.
One other small thing is this is again going to be a sort of thing going forward, which hopefully won't be a major issue, but will probably at least plague you at least at sort of mid levels. Is in that case the observing was a little all over the place, but I think it's generally best to try and follow what the observer is showing you, even if it's not what you would ideally like to be talking about, just because. For an audience's point of view, keeping in mind the material you're talking about, which is not on screen, can be quite hard. So yeah, if you're talking at length about a board that's not on screen, people are just gonna, I think, just generally find that kind of confusing.
Yeah, big shout out to the Aegis observers who like are in the same call as us and just listen to us. So
it will happen though that even when the observer is on point, they'll have a different idea than you do, or a different reason for going out. And just to be aware that it's generally best to seed that and be like, okay, we'll talk a little bit more about this competition that we were just talking about and we want to talk about more, but we won't keep talking about it for like the rest of the round or whatever.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah.
Boop.
Yeah, quickly. I'm just kidding. That's a lie. So Invective, I think one thing that you're gonna have to really think about, because this is an issue that I have, is I get like really fucking stoked to cast, right? And I actually let that energy kind of take over a little bit in a negative way, rather than like thinking about it in terms of like bottling it up and using it as a weapon. You know what I mean? So just in terms of like a mindset thing, I think that would be really good for you in terms of taking that excitement but not letting it take advantage of you. To where you're not focused or you're not matching energy, and you're again intentional about things, even about the things that you're excited about, right? Because one thing in casting is if you cast everything the same, nothing is individual, right? So if there's something that's just dope, right, and you want to really get through it, but you cast it the exact same way as you did, just a similar detail, that's where that can be a little confusing. So just giving those special moments that are special, like their actual gift to be special, and then that way you can kind of gauge your excitement and work through it that way. I think that could be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and then Rain, I think you were counting all the times you used filler words in your head while doing that exercise.
No.
No. And so like basically because of that, I think that's just like what happened, and I think it was just like really good to almost like be in that situation in which you're like, all right, like now's a great time to try something else, blah blah blah. But yeah, I actually think that when it comes to polish, it sounded more polished, right? I think like when it came to some of the partner work, that we could be a little bit more interactive in some of that. But for what your intentions were for this particular exercise, I think you worked on the right things. And so when you bring it to your casting, you can put it all together, because it was kind of like all or nothing today, right? And so like when you get into practice, that you're able to use it as a hammer rather than just like throwing a hammer and a wrench at a nail and then it not doing anything, because that's not how that works, right? So I think that's good. And then something that y'all, I think, we're kind of alluding to, you guys sound really good together, in my opinion. So like in terms of like practice and stuff, I think y'all could really help support each other and what you need to be good at and what you're both working on. I think you could grow together. So just throwing that out there as well.
All right, cool. So Invective and Rain, I don't know if you could give us some final thoughts from your experiences today, and we'll wrap it up.
Oh, I mean, I had a great time. Rain was an awesome partner to do this with.
Same. I love casting. And yeah, I like. I think it goes to show, like, Boop. I think when we met, it was really interesting to realize that, like, each and every one of us are at different points, and we're all working on something, right? So, like, movie and sugars, like, you got your, like, first taste of it today, and you've got stuff to work on, and I've got stuff to work on. Everyone who's in this call has stuff to work on, and so it's just really nice to get. It's hard to come by direct feedback, I think, when you're doing something like this for the joy of it, for the pleasure of it. So I hope that we continue to do these, and I hope that we're building a culture in this community of being able to give it to each other with both barrels, and know that that's coming from a place of love and constructive criticism, and not like competition and tearing each other down and all that sort of stuff. So I really appreciate you guys being direct and honest, and still making me feel safe.
Oh, I appreciate that. All right.
Yeah, that's awesome. A rising tide lifts all ships, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna
Early.
officially close this for now. So tomorrow at the same time as today, I imagine it's going to be a lot less practical, unfortunately, for a lot of people. But tomorrow at the same time, we're going to be doing the Horizon Bound casting set review, which is basically just going through all the material in Horizon Bound and trying to figure out ways to present it on cast or use it on cast, and just pre-chewing the set a little bit. So if any of you happen to be around for that, please feel more than free to come in and join in. It's going to be more like a round table. I'll come up with a bunch of topic areas that just open up for the discussion. I imagine it'll be around in the area of 1-2 hours or so, depending how it goes. But other than that, thank you all for coming, and I'll stop the recording.